I'll take everything, he said. I froze. Everything? Did I hear him right? Sorry? I blinked at him. Everything, as in, one dress? Two? Or you mean the whole collection? The whole thing, he repeated casually, like he was buying gum at the store. His tone was calm, but his eyes, sharp, calculating. The kind of eyes that never asked, only decided. I laughed nervously. You can't just buy an entire collection after a 10-minute glance. Oh, I can, he smirked. And I just did. That was the first time I met Alexander Moretti, the notorious owner of one of the biggest fashion houses in Europe. A man who was rumored to fire people with one sentence, launch brands with another, and destroy rivals over breakfast. And now, apparently, he wanted all my designs. And maybe, me? Why? I asked, crossing my arms. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Because talent should never be hidden. And because, he paused. You intrigue me. I raised a brow. You don't even know me. Exactly, he said. That's the intriguing part. I tried to keep my face neutral, but my heart was pounding. This was surreal. Yesterday, I was a struggling designer worrying about rent. Today, the most powerful man in fashion wanted to buy my entire collection. Let me think, I said, trying to sound cool. He chuckled. You don't get it. I'm not offering. I'm deciding. The collection is mine. Oh really? I tilted my head. And what makes you think I'll sell it to you? He leaned in, his voice almost a whisper. Because I don't hear no very often. Maybe you should practice, I shot back. He blinked, then laughed, an honest, surprised laugh. Sharp tongue. I like that. The tension between us was electric. People around the showroom were pretending not to stare, but I could feel their eyes. Fine, I said, tapping my pen against the table. You can buy the collection. But on one condition. Name it, he said instantly. You don't bother me again. His smile widened. Oh, you just made the deal much more interesting. That night, I thought it was over. I told myself I'd take the money, invest in my next line, and move on. Simple. Clean. Done. But I underestimated Alexander Moretti. The next morning, I found a black car waiting outside my apartment. The driver handed me a note. You forgot something. Lunch at 1. Don't be late. A.M. I crumpled the note, muttering, arrogant idiot. Still. I showed up. The restaurant was absurd. Crystal chandeliers, golden cutlery, violins in the background. I walked in wearing jeans and a leather jacket. The maitre d' looked horrified. Then Alexander stood up from his table, eyes sparkling with amusement. Perfect. You've already stolen the room. Or ruined it, I muttered, sliding into the chair. I don't belong here. You belong anywhere you walk into, he said without hesitation. I rolled my eyes. Do you always talk like you're auditioning for a romance novel? Only when I'm serious, he said, smirking. Lunch was a battle. He complimented, I deflected. He teased, I countered. You know, he said, cutting into his steak, I could make you famous overnight. Imagine your name on every magazine cover. Every celebrity wearing your designs. Sounds like a nightmare, I replied, sipping my water. He leaned forward. You're not afraid of fame. You're afraid of me. I set my glass down. Wrong. I'm annoyed by you. He grinned. That's step 1. By the end of lunch, he'd offered me a contract, partnership, funding, exposure. Everything a designer could dream of. I pushed the papers back toward him. No. His brow arched. No? I said I'd sell you the collection. I didn't say I'd sell you me. For the first time, his charming mask slipped. Just for a second. He wasn't used to rejection. Then, the smile returned. Challenge accepted. That night, I got another note. Dinner tomorrow. I'll cook. Unless you're scared. A.M. I laughed out loud in my tiny apartment. Scared? Please. I'd faced worse than one overconfident billionaire. Or at least, that's what I thought. Because when I showed up at his penthouse the next evening, that's when the real game began. The elevator doors opened and I stepped into a different world. Floor-to-ceiling windows. City lights spread out like diamonds below. A grand piano in the corner, untouched, but polished to perfection. And there he was, Alexander Moretti, in a black shirt with sleeves rolled up, holding a frying pan like he actually knew what he was doing. You cook? I asked, raising an eyebrow. He smirked. I conquer. Sometimes with food. I laughed. Please don't poison me. I still have rent to pay. The table was already set, candles, wine, ridiculous flowers that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. You know, I said, dropping my jacket on the chair, if this is another business pitch, you're wasting your time. No pitch tonight, he said, flipping something in the pan. Tonight, I'm just a man making dinner for a woman who fascinates him. Wow, I muttered. Do you practice these lines in the mirror? He grinned. Only the good ones. The food, okay, I'll admit it, was amazing. Homemade pasta, roasted vegetables, wine that tasted like velvet. Not bad, I said, chewing slowly. Not bad? He feigned offense. This is a 200-year-old family recipe. And yet, still edible. Impressive. He laughed, shaking his head. You really don't let anyone win, do you? Depends on the game, I shot back. We talked, about design, about his insane travel schedule, about my not-so-glamorous studio apartment with a leaky ceiling. And yet, somewhere between the sarcasm and the laughter, something shifted. He looked at me like no one had ever looked at me before. Not as a struggling designer. Not as just another girl. But as if I was a puzzle he wanted to solve, piece by piece. At one point, I stood to look out at the skyline. He came up behind me, close enough that I could feel the heat of him, but not touching. Tell me the truth, he said softly. Why do you push me away? I turned to face him, my chin high. Because men like you are dangerous. His eyes darkened. And yet, you came. I smirked. Curiosity. Not attraction. Liar, he whispered. The moment stretched. Too close. Too intense. My heart was betraying me, racing. So I did what I do best, I broke it with humor. Fine, I said, stepping back. Dinner was good. 10 points. But don't think you're special. My neighbor makes better lasagna. He laughed, shaking his head. Cold as ice. You're going to make me work for this, aren't you? Finally, he gets it, I said, grabbing my bag. Good night, Mr. Moretti. But as I reached the door, he called after me. I'll win. I paused, hand on the handle. You're used to winning, Alexander. But I'm not one of your business deals. That's why I'll win, he said confidently. Because you're the only deal that matters. I left, my heart in chaos. And that night, I promised myself, don't fall for him. Don't you dare. The next morning, I walked into my tiny studio. On my work table, there was a single box. No note. No name. Inside, the most beautiful pair of hand-stitched Italian heels I'd ever seen. My size. Perfect fit. I groaned out loud. Oh no. Oh no no no. He's starting the war. And he wasn't done. By the end of the week. Flowers at the studio. A tailor-made sketchbook delivered to my door. A billboard across the street from my apartment that simply said, "Talent needs freedom." with his signature at the bottom. I was furious. Embarrassed. Flattered. And maybe, just maybe, a little excited. When I finally confronted him, storming into his office, I slammed the sketchbook on his desk. This has to stop. He looked up from his laptop, smiling lazily. Didn't like the sketchbook? Didn't like the billboard, I snapped. He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. Good. It means you saw it. Alexander, you don't understand. I don't want to be one of your trophies. Trophy? His voice sharpened. You think that's what this is? What else could it be? He stood, suddenly serious. This isn't about power. Or control. This is about you. About the way you walked into that showroom and refused to bow. Do you have any idea how rare that is in my world? I hesitated, caught off guard. Most people want something from me, he continued. You don't. That makes you dangerous to me. And irresistible. Silence. I finally said, then you should stay away. For both our sakes. He smiled faintly. Too late. And in that moment, I knew, this wasn't just a game anymore. It was war. And maybe, the beginning of something I couldn't control. The next time I saw Alexander was at Fashion Week. Not because I wanted to. Because he made sure I couldn't avoid him. As I stepped onto the runway backstage, nerves twisting in my stomach, I heard his voice. Smooth, confident, impossible to ignore. Beautiful, he said. I turned, ready with a sharp remark. But he wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the dresses. My dresses. Hanging in perfect order, waiting for the show. You did this, he said, almost proudly. And tonight, the world will see it. Something inside me softened. Just a little. When the show began, my models walked with power, with fire. The crowd murmured, gasped, applauded. And at the very end, when I came out for my bow, I saw him. Front row. Smiling. Not his usual smug grin. A real smile. And suddenly, my chest ached in a way I didn't expect. After the show, reporters swarmed me. Cameras flashed. Questions flew. And then, through the chaos, he appeared, cutting through the crowd like he owned the place, which, knowing him, he probably did. You were magnificent, he said simply. I smirked. Don't flatter me. It won't work. Who said I'm flattering? He shot back. I'm stating facts. Later, at the after party, I found myself standing with him by the balcony. Music pulsed inside, but out here, it was just us and the city lights. You really did it, he said quietly. You didn't need me. You never did. I blinked. That was unexpected. Then why keep chasing me? I asked softly. He leaned closer. Because not needing me is exactly why I need you. For the first time, I didn't have a witty comeback. Just silence. And maybe the tiniest, traitorous smile. Careful, I finally said, regaining my ground. If you keep saying things like that, I might almost like you. He grinned. Almost as progress. The days that followed were different. He didn't flood me with gifts this time. No billboards, no flowers. Just presents. He'd show up at my studio, sitting quietly in the corner while I worked. No interruptions, no demands. Just watching. Sometimes bringing coffee. Sometimes just being there. And I hated to admit it, but I didn't mind. One evening, as I worked late, I caught him sketching something in my notebook. Hey! I snatched it away. That's my sketchbook. He raised an eyebrow. Relax. I was just trying to design a jacket. I glanced at the page, and burst out laughing. This looks like a trash bag with sleeves. Excuse me, he said, pretending to be offended. That's cutting-edge couture. Cutting edge ugly, I teased. And then I realized I was laughing. Really laughing. And he was, too. But the truth was, the more time I spent with him, the harder it was to keep my walls up. Because Alexander wasn't just charming. He was relentless, yes, but also sincere. Unexpectedly human. One night, after a long day, he told me about his past. About growing up in a house where nothing was ever enough. About building his empire because he wanted control in a world that gave him none. I listened. Really listened. And for the first time, I saw him not as the untouchable billionaire, but as a man. And that was dangerous. Why are you telling me this? I asked quietly. Because you're the only one I want to tell, he admitted. My heart betrayed me. It softened. I looked away quickly. Careful, Alexander. If you keep talking like this, you might almost win me over. Almost, he said, smiling. I'll take it. But just when things felt like they were changing. His ex walked into the picture. Perfect. Glamorous. The kind of woman who belonged in his world. She looked me up and down, then leaned into him like she still owned him. And I realized, maybe I was in much deeper than I wanted to admit. Her entrance was like a storm. Tall, flawless, dressed head to toe in couture I couldn't afford even if I sold a kidney. She had the kind of beauty that screamed magazine cover. And she walked straight toward Alexander like she still owned his world. Darling, she purred, kissing his cheek. It's been too long. I froze. My stomach tightened. Darling? Alexander looked surprised but not shaken. Clara. Of course her name would be Clara. Elegant. Sharp. Dangerous. I tried to act unfazed, but Clara's eyes flicked to me instantly, scanning me like I was some intern who'd wandered into the wrong party. And who's this? She asked sweetly, though her smile was venom. Before I could answer, Alexander said, She's the reason you're here, Clara. She's the designer of tonight's collection. Her perfect brows arched. Really? This is the talent you couldn't stop talking about? Ouch. I forced a smile. Yes. This is me. Nice to meet you. Clara tilted her head, her diamond earrings catching the light. Adorable. Reminds me of when I first started, you know, back when ambition was still cute. My blood boiled. But instead of snapping, I smiled wider. Oh, don't worry. I'm sure ambition is still very cute, when it's genuine. Alexander coughed, hiding a laugh. Clara's eyes narrowed. Score one for me. The rest of the night was torture. Clara clung to Alexander, reminiscing loudly about their trips to Milan, Paris, New York. She dropped names like confetti. And me? I pretended not to care. Pretended I was too busy with other guests. But every time I caught Alexander's eyes across the room, he was watching me. Always watching me. Later, when the crowd thinned, Clara finally left, but not without a parting shot. She kissed Alexander's cheek again, her hand lingering on his chest. Call me, she whispered loud enough for me to hear. For old time's sake. I rolled my eyes so hard they nearly fell out of my head. When she was gone, Alexander turned to me. You're jealous, he said. I crossed my arms. Please. I don't get jealous. I get annoyed. He smirked. So you were annoyed? Yes, I admitted. Annoyed that women like her think they can just claim you like a prize. And why does that bother you? He asked softly. I hesitated. Too long. He smiled knowingly. Exactly. Don't flatter yourself, I muttered. I just hate shallow people. And yet, he said, stepping closer, you're still thinking about her. About how much makeup she must use to look that perfect? Yes. I am. He laughed, shaking his head. God, you're impossible. Good, I said. Keeps things interesting. But the truth was, Clara had gotten under my skin. Not because I didn't trust myself, but because I didn't trust him. Was he still the man who collected trophies? Who saw women as accessories to his empire? Or was he really changing, for me? The next few days, I tried to keep my distance. I buried myself in work, sketching until my hands ached. I ignored his texts, his calls. But then, late one evening, I heard a knock at my studio door. It was him. Standing there in the rain, holding 2 coffees. "Before you slam the door," he said, "hear me out." I sighed. "What do you want, Alexander?" "To explain. Clara doesn't matter. She hasn't for a long time. She just hates losing what she once had." "And what did she have?" I asked carefully. He looked straight at me. A man who thought he needed control more than he needed love. But that man isn't standing here anymore. My throat tightened. "Why are you telling me this?" I whispered. "Because you think I'll hurt you. And I want you to know, the only thing I want is to protect you. And maybe," he paused, his voice dropping lower, "maybe even love you, if you let me." I swallowed hard. The walls I'd built felt thinner than ever. "You're saying dangerous things, Moretti," I whispered. He smiled faintly. "Good. Because I'm done being safe." And for the first time I didn't walk away. I let him in. Literally, into my studio, where he sat with me as I worked, sipping coffee, teasing me, sometimes just watching quietly. And metaphorically, into the space I swore I'd never let anyone touch. The war between us was changing. It wasn't just battle anymore. It was surrender. But whose? It was the night of the big gala, the launch of the new season for Alexander's fashion house. And me? I was terrified. Not of the show, not of the crowd, not even of the flashing cameras. But of what he might do next. Because Alexander Moretti never did anything small. Backstage, models were rushing. Stylists were screaming. And I was frantically adjusting the last pieces of the collection. Then I saw him. At the entrance, looking impossibly calm, impeccably dressed, radiating that dangerous, magnetic energy that had driven me crazy from day one. "I have to tell you something," he said, stepping closer. "Alexander, not now," I said, tying a hemline. "Not here," he whispered, "but I can't wait any longer." Moments later, the show began. Models glided down the runway, lights flashing. Cameras clicked. My heart raced. And then, mid-show, a hush fell over the crowd. Alexander stepped out on the runway. Wearing nothing unusual, except that he carried a single red rose. And a small note, held high for everyone to see. "To the designer who stole my world, I don't want anyone else. Only you." The crowd gasped. Cameras snapped. People whispered. And I froze. When he reached me backstage, the rose extended, I couldn't help laughing. "You're insane," I said. "Maybe," he admitted. "But I'm done with subtlety. Done with waiting. Done with games." I rolled my eyes, but my chest felt like it might explode. "So, what? You're just going to keep making dramatic gestures until I cave?" "Not dramatic. Honest," he said. "And yes, until you let me in." I stared at him. For weeks, I'd fought him. Fended him off with wit, sarcasm, and cold logic. But now, my walls were crumbling. "You're ridiculous," I whispered, finally. "Only for you," he replied, leaning closer. And in that moment, I realized, I didn't want him to stop being ridiculous. "Fine," I said, finally, my voice low but firm. "I'll admit it. You've gotten under my skin." He smiled, dangerously victorious. "Under? Or into?" "Into," I muttered, before I could stop myself. He laughed, soft and real. "Good. Because I'm not going anywhere. After the gala, he walked me home. Rain had started, but we didn't care. He held the rose, I held his hand. You really went all out, I teased, trying to sound nonchalant. Only for you, he said, leaning his forehead against mine. I don't do half measures with people I care about. You're impossible, I whispered, smiling despite myself. And you are irresistible, he said softly. That night, I realized something. Alexander Moretti wasn't just a challenge, a storm, a dangerous obsession. He was something I wanted. Something I couldn't run from. I didn't need to fall. I was already there. And so, the ice finally melted. Not all at once. Not perfectly. But enough. Enough to let him in. Enough to let me admit. Love wasn't just a game. Not with him. It was real. Chaotic. Terrifying. And absolutely worth it.